3D Specs. Item Number: SCP-178. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures: SCP-178 is to be stored in a Class 3 anomalous object container, guarded by no fewer than 2 armed personnel, with Level 3 clearance when not undergoing testing. Item is to be removed from containment only with the written permission of personnel, with Level 4 clearance or higher. Following Incident Number 178-14 Alpha, all tests are to be monitored remotely, and the presence of all personnel apart from test subjects in the testing area during experimentation is expressly prohibited. Description: SCP-178 is a pair of white stereoscopic, 3D, glasses with a rectangular white cardboard frame and lenses of transparent blue and red, left and right lenses respectively, plastic. The item exhibits no unusual physical properties, apart from a slight discoloration of the cardboard consistent with age. When worn, the wearer begins perceiving large bipedal entities in addition to its ordinary surroundings. Entities reportedly exhibit a docile and occasionally curious behavior. Reports include entities leaning over the shoulder of persons working and observing them with interest, with one exception. Any attempt by the wearer, or any other personnel, see Incident Report 178-14 Alpha, to directly interact with the entities results in severe lacerations suddenly appearing on persons involved. The appearance of lacerations is rapid and continues until the moment the wearer expires. The pattern of lacerations is always consistent with being slashed with 3 parallel, tapered sharp objects of lengths varying between 14.2 and 27.4 centimeters, and maximum thickness varying between 2.9 and 8.1 centimeters. Recording and measuring devices used during testing failed to detect any anomalies, including while lacerations were appearing on subjects. Subjects do not report hearing any sounds emanating from the entities. Long-term observation of subjects exposed to the item reveals no lasting effects. Stereoscopic images viewed through the item appear 3-dimensional. Addendum 1. Item was recovered on blank, 19 blank, in blank, Tennessee, by Agent, redacted, operating as deep cover agent in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who arrived in the town following reports of a blank-year-old child being found dead in her second-floor bedroom, apparently as a result of an unusual mauling. Agent redacted noticed a blood-stained stereoscopic image of a Ferris wheel adjacent to where the child was discovered, and after some searching, found the item under the child's bed, where it had apparently been thrown during the child's death throes. Agent redacted then proceeded to call a recovery team to his location. Following the recovery team's arrival, Agent redacted wore the item and looked at the image, reporting nothing unusual until he turned his head to his left, whereupon he noticed an entity approximately an inch from his face, leaning over his shoulder and looking at the stereoscopic image. In the debriefing, Agent redacted reported also noticing several other entities in the room, observing him and the recovery team. Agent redacted refrained from attempting to interact with the entities, and the item was recovered without incident. Addendum 2. All experiments are to be logged in File 178-E. Addendum 3. Personnel with Level 4 clearance are urged to read Incident Report 178-14 Alpha. Reading Incident Report 178-14 Alpha is mandatory for all personnel with Level 4 clearance or higher, overseeing or approving experiments with the item. Warning: failure to comply with Addendum 3 is grounds for disciplinary measures. File 178-E. All experiments performed on SCP-178 are to be logged here. Dr. Blank. Experiment 178-E1. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank and Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 19, blank. Procedure: D-Class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be observed via bulletproof glass window to adjacent control room and via audio and video recording devices. D-Class subject will be instructed to wear SCP-178 and report what it observes until told otherwise. Results. Subject D1783-1. Male, 41. No discernible mental abnormalities. Is placed in the chamber and told to wear SCP-178. Subject is not told of SCP-178's nature. Subject does as instructed, then immediately expresses distress by throwing SCP-178 away and covering its eyes while vocalizing fear. Research staff instruct subject to describe the source of its distress. Subject unresponsive. Research staff attempts to calm subject. Subject responds by uncovering its face and looking around, appearing to still be distressed. Research staff instructs the subject once again to describe the source of its distress. Subject responds by stating the presence of an unfamiliar entity in close proximity to its face the moment it wore SCP-178. Research staff instruct subject to describe the entity in detail. Subject responds by stating entity was hideous and had too many eyes. Research staff instruct subject to describe the entity in greater detail. Subject states that did not manage to perceive many details before removing SCP-178. Research staff instruct subject to wear SCP-178. Subject uncooperative. Research staff repeats instruction. Subject uncooperative. Research staff threatens subject with termination unless it cooperates. Subject uncooperative. Testing is ended and subject placed under surveillance to test for long-lasting symptoms of exposure. Subject displays symptoms of mild paranoia for 2 days before returning to normal behavioral patterns. Surveillance ended after 30 days, and subject terminated. Note: well, this wasn't very informative, but at least it confirms we have an actual anomalous object in our hands. Experiment 178-E2. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank and Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 19, blank. Procedure: D-Class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be observed via bulletproof glass window to adjacent control room and via audio and video recording devices. D-Class subject will be instructed to wear SCP-178 and report what it observes until told otherwise. Results. Subject D63-16-4. Female, 31. No discernible mental abnormalities. Is placed in the chamber and instructed to wear SCP-178. Subject is not told of SCP-178's true nature. Subject does as instructed and immediately begins emitting expletives and walking backwards towards the chamber's wall, looking intently at something to its 1 o'clock. Research staff instruct subject to describe what it is seeing. Subject presses its back to chamber wall and describes seeing an entity standing halfway across the test chamber by the wall, looking at the wall. Research staff instruct subject to describe the entity in detail. Subject states the entity is bipedal, possesses 2 additional upper appendages ending in large conical protrusions, and a smooth head. Research staff instruct subject to provide additional details. Subject begins describing the entity, and then suddenly expresses distress, stating, "Oh God, it's looking right at me." Subject collapses against test chamber wall, still staring in the same direction. Research staff inquires as to whether entity is exhibiting hostility or not. Subject states that it is not moving, but looking at it. Subject instructed to remove SCP-178. Subject refuses, stating that it does not trust the entity. Subject reminded that uncooperative behavior will result in termination. Subject removes SCP-178 and begins looking around the test chamber in distress, stating that it can no longer see the entity. Subject instructed to wear SCP-178. Subject complies and states that the entity is still looking at it. Subject instructed to report any changes in the entity's behavior. 2 minutes and 37 seconds pass before subject states the entity is no longer looking at it. Subject states entity is looking at the wall again. Subject reports no further changes for 17 minutes and 55 seconds. Test ended. Notes. Seems strange that the thing the subject saw was so disinterested, given the way the item came into Foundation attention. We didn't pick anything up in any of the recording equipment either. I wonder if this entity is really there, or an illusion generated by the item. Experiment 178-E3. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank and Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 19 blank. Procedure. D-Class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be observed via bulletproof glass window to adjacent control room and via audio and video recording devices. A fractal blue and red image is to be placed on one wall of the test chamber, and a plastic bin containing 10 standard tennis balls is to be placed near the opposite wall. D-Class subject will be told SCP-178 is an experiment in next-generation 3D specs, and that staring at the fractal image while wearing SCP-178 will allow it to see animated three-dimensional images. D-Class subject will then be instructed to wear SCP-178 and report what it observes. In case the subject perceives any entities, it will be instructed to throw a tennis ball at them. Results: D-5144-1. Male, 27, arson, murder. No discernible mental abnormalities. Is instructed to stand at the end of the test chamber, opposite the fractal image, and wear SCP-178. Subject complies and expresses surprise and discomfort. Subject instructed to describe what it perceives. Subject states it perceives two entities standing in the room. One, from now on referred to as Entity 1, next to the fractal image with its back to the subject, and the other, from now on referred to as Entity 2, crossing the room from left to right. Subject opines that the person who designed the animation is mentally unbalanced. Subject instructed to describe Entity 2's gait. Subject states it walks using both its legs and upper appendages. Subject equates Entity 2's gait to that of a gorilla if someone put its skeleton together wrong. Research staff inquires whether both entities are similar. Subject replies that apart from size, they appear to be generally similar. Subject then proceeds to describe entities fitting the description of the entity in Experiment 178E2. Subject instructed to pick up one tennis ball and throw it at Entity 2. Subject complies. Both the research staff and the audio recording devices observe the ball moving uninterrupted until it hits the floor on the opposite side of the test chamber. Subject expresses surprise and distress, attempting to back away for 0.7 seconds before severe lacerations begin appearing on its body. Appearance of lacerations continues for 4.7 seconds until subject presumably expires from massive bleeding and trauma. Autopsy on expired subject reveals lacerations consistent with being slashed by 3 sharp objects, relatively thick and tapering to a point approximately 17 centimeters in length and 4 centimeters in maximum width. Analysis of ball thrown by subject discovers only trace amounts of human sweat, matching subject D-5144-1. Notes: Holy! Expletive redacted. It would appear that these things don't like being disturbed. On the other hand, that ball sailed through the air like nothing was there, and with the death of the subject, we cannot know if it indeed passed where the entity was or not. This is still far from conclusive, but the pattern of laceration matches the findings at the item's recovery site, so at least we've established beyond any doubt that it is dangerous. It's interesting to note that so far the entities are pretty consistent in appearance, despite variance between test subjects. I wonder if any non-violent interaction between the subject and the entities is possible. Experiment 178E4. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank and Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 19 blank. Procedure: D-Class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be observed via bulletproof glass window to adjacent control room, via audio and video recording devices, via infrared cameras, electromagnetic radiation sensors, and motion detectors. A fractal blue and red image is to be placed on one wall of the test chamber. D-Class subject will be told SCP-178 is an experiment in next-generation 3D specs, and that staring at the fractal image while wearing SCP-178 will allow it to see animated three-dimensional images. D-Class subject will then be instructed to wear SCP-178 and report what it observes. In case the subject perceives any entities, it will be instructed to speak with them. Results: D-8429-1, female, 19, no discernible mental abnormalities, is instructed to stand near the wall opposite of the fractal image and wear SCP-178. Subject complies and immediately expresses revulsion. Subject instructed to describe what it perceives. Subject describes one entity similar to those previously reported standing approximately 2 meters from it and looking at it. Subject instructed to attempt to speak to it. Subject appears confused as to why it would attempt to speak to an animated image. Research staff repeats instruction. Subject expresses irritation and says, "Hello, weird thing, how are you today?" in a bored manner. Lacerations begin appearing on the subject's torso and abdomen, 0.2 seconds after subject finishes speaking. Subject's right arm severed above the elbow after 2.4 seconds. Laceration and subject vocalization stops after 8.4 seconds, when subject presumably expires. Autopsy on expired subject reveals the same kind of lacerations, indicating sharp objects approximately 21 centimeters in length and 5 centimeters in width. Notes. I guess that means we can assume that any attempt to interact with the entities ends in hostility. And nothing on any of the sensors either. We're establishing a pattern here, but the main question is still whether the death of the subjects is caused by the item or by external entities. I wonder if subjects not wearing the item can be affected by it. Experiment 178E5. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank and Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 19 blank. Procedure: 2D class subjects are to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be observed via bulletproof glass window to adjacent control room, via audio and video recording devices, via infrared cameras, electromagnetic radiation sensors, and motion detectors. Both subjects will have general knowledge of the properties of SCP-178. One subject, designated Subject 1, will be instructed to wear SCP-178, and will describe to the other subject, designated Subject 2, the location and appearance of any perceived entities in the test chamber. Subject 2 will then attempt to interact with the entities. Results: Subject 1, D6195-5, female, 35, 3 counts of murder, GBH, no discernible mental abnormality. And Subject 2, D5732-1, female, 27, no discernible mental abnormalities, are placed in the test chamber. Subject 1 instructed to wear SCP-178. Subject 1 expresses dislike for the research staff. Subject 2 concurs. Research staff reminds both subjects that uncooperative behavior is grounds for termination. Subject 1 wears SCP-178 and begins emitting expletives. Subject 2 expresses distress and inquires as to the reason for Subject 1's consternation. Subject 1 states that, "There's one right behind you." Subject 2 turns around and states that it cannot see anything unusual. Research staff calms both subjects by assuring them the perceived entities are harmless, and instructs Subject 1 to assist Subject 2 in making contact with the entities. Subject 1 states there is an entity about a foot in front of her, and that the entity's head is about 2 feet taller than her. Subject 2 inquires whether the entity is looking at it. Subject 1 replies in the affirmative. Subject 2 attempts to calm itself, and looks where it considers the entity's head to be, and say, hi there? Lacerations immediately begin appearing on Subject 2's torso and face for 0.9 seconds, before Subject 2's neck is severed. Subject 1 vocalizes acute distress, and runs towards the test chamber door. Subject 1 attempts to bludgeon the door open unsuccessfully for 5 seconds, before turning around and saying, presumably to a perceived entity, "No, get away." Subject 1 begins suffering lacerations across the abdomen and torso. Movement, laceration, and vocalization cease simultaneously after 17.3 seconds. Autopsy on expired subjects revealed 2 different laceration patterns. The relatively few lacerations suffered by Subject 2 are consistent with the lacerations caused by 3 sharp objects, approximately 27 centimeters in length and 8 centimeters in maximum width, while the many lacerations suffered by Subject 1 are consistent with lacerations caused by 3 sharp objects, approximately 14 centimeters in length and 3 centimeters in width. Note: we still don't know whether the entities are actually there or are illusions caused by SCP-178, but now we know they can affect more than the wearer. This means that this object is potentially much more dangerous than we initially surmised. Interestingly enough, the 2 subjects showed different laceration patterns, as though they were inflicted by different entities. A shame we didn't ask Subject 1 about the number of entities in the room. We'll do better next time. It's also possible that Subject wouldn't have been harmed if she hadn't addressed the entities herself. That's also worth checking out. Experiment 178E6. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank and Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 19 blank. Procedure: 2 D-class subjects are to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be observed via bulletproof glass window to adjacent control room, via audio and video recording devices, via infrared cameras, electromagnetic radiation sensors, and motion detectors. Both subjects will have general knowledge of the properties of SCP-178. One subject, designated Subject 1, will be instructed to wear SCP-178 and will describe to the other subject, designated Subject 2, the location and appearance of any perceived entities in the test chamber. Subject 2 will then attempt to interact with the entities. Subject 1 will be instructed not to speak or otherwise interact with entities at any eventuality. To ensure this, Subject 1 will be told that any attempt to make contact with the entities will result in termination. Results: Subject 1, D8361-6, male, 44, no discernible mental abnormality, and Subject 2, D3617-6, male, 52, no discernible mental abnormalities, are placed in the test chamber. Subject 1 is instructed to wear SCP-178. Subject 1 uncooperative. Subject 1 instructed again to wear SCP-178. Subject 1 uncooperative. Subject 2 urges Subject 1 to cooperate for fear of punitive measures. Subject 1 wears SCP-178 and expresses surprise and disgust. Research staff inquires as to the number of entities. Subject 1 states, "They're, expletive deleted, everywhere, Doc. There's 9 of them here with us." Subject 1 then turns to look at the bulletproof glass window separating the testing chamber from the control room, and states, "And there's 3 in there with you. Look, there's one leaning right over your..." Data expunged. See Incident Report 178-14 Alpha for more information. Notes: following the loss of all research staff in Incident 178-14 Alpha, the containment protocols have been revised. 057. Experiment 178E7. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 2000 blank. Procedure: D-class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178. The test chamber is to be divided into 2 partitions in a 5-to-1 ratio, with the smaller partition containing the chamber entrance, separated by bulletproof glass, with a small hole in the middle covered in steel mesh, to allow the passage of sound from one partition to the other. The test chamber will be observed remotely via audio and video recording devices, via infrared cameras, electromagnetic radiation sensors, and motion detectors. Subject is to be told of SCP-178's nature, and instructed to wear SCP-178, and attempt to communicate with entities on the other side of the partition. Results: Subject D1362-7, male, 52, rape, double homicide, no discernible mental abnormalities, is placed in the test chamber and instructed to wear SCP-178. Subject expresses displeasure, but complies. Subject instructed to describe what it perceives. Subject describes 4 entities in the other partition. Subject states entities look docile, 2 of them jabbing the walls, and the other 2 looking at it through the glass. Research staff inquires whether any entities are present in the subject's partition. Subject looks around and replies that none are present. Subject instructed to attempt to communicate with the entities. Subject expresses desire to get this over with. Subject says, presumably towards the perceived entities, "Hello, can you hear me?" before recoiling suddenly. Research staff inquires as to the reason the subject recoiled. The subject replies that the entities have begun pounding the glass with their upper appendages. Research staff inquires whether they are succeeding in causing any visible damage to the partition. Subject replies that they are not. Audio recordings fail to pick up any sounds apart from those emitted by the subject. Research staff inquires whether the subject can hear the entities pounding on the partition. Subject appears perplexed and replies to the negative. No changes occur for 10 minutes and 14 seconds. Research staff announces the end of the experiment. Subject expresses relief and removes SCP-178, placing it on the floor. Testing chamber door opens, and 2 security personnel, agents, data expunged, demand that subject comes with them, presumably to D-class cells. Subject turns towards door and begins complying, when lacerations begin appearing across his face, torso, and upper arms. Subject vocalizes distress, and both security personnel recoil and emit expletives. Agent Redacted radios a containment breach. Agent Redacted begins firing his weapon into the chamber, hitting and killing the subject after 2.1 seconds of being lacerated. Containment teams are mobilized to the testing area, and the sector goes into lockdown. Searches are concluded after an hour and 4 minutes, without any findings or further incidents, and lockdown is lifted. SCP-178 is found where Subject D-13627 dropped it. Note: expletive redacted. That could have been catastrophic. First time we get to experiment on SCP-178 and the whole sector goes into lockdown. The brass aren't going to be pleased. I think we should come up with some lower risk experiments for the foreseeable future. I guess anywhere that attempts to establish contact with the entities can die even after removing SCP-178. It's interesting to note that Agent Redacted suffered no ill effect despite firing at the entity. I estimate it is because he had only very limited knowledge about the entities observed by those who wear the item. Experiment 178-E8. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 2000, blank. Procedure: D-class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178 and a video camera connected to monitor. The test chamber is to be observed remotely via audio and video recording devices, via infrared cameras, electromagnetic radiation sensors, and motion detectors. Subject is to be instructed to hold SCP-178 up to the camera and report what it sees on the monitor. The camera is connected both to the monitor and to an external recording device. Pending the success of the experiment, the research staff will submit a request to view the recording. Results: Subject D-61-28-6. Female, 28, 15 counts of GBH, 2 counts of murder, no discernible mental abnormalities, is placed in the test chamber and instructed to pick up SCP-178 and hold it up to the camera. Subject complies and holds SCP-178 approximately 20 centimeters from the camera. Subject instructed to hold SCP-178 up to the camera so that it sees through it. Subject inquires as to which lens it should hold it to. Subject instructed to hold the red lens up to the camera. Subject complies. Research staff inquires whether the monitor displays anything unusual. Subject replies to the negative. Subject instructed to hold the blue lens up to the camera. Subject complies and reports that the monitor still does not display anything unusual. Subject instructed to put down the camera and wear SCP-178. Subject complies. Subject vocalizes acute distress, stumbling backwards while staring at the monitor. Research staff inquires as to the source of the subject's distress. Subject reports 3 entities crouched in front of the monitor, looking at it. Subject instructed to remove SCP-178. Test ended. Notes: it would appear that either the item functions similarly to ordinary stereoscopic glasses and requires 2 eyes, or that the effect isn't merely optic. There's a way to test that. Experiment 178-E9. Name: Dr. Blank, with Dr. Blank assisting. Date: blank, 2000 blank. Procedure: D-class subject is to be placed in secured test chamber containing SCP-178 and a special mount containing 2 small video cameras simulating a pair of human eyes connected to monitor that splices both images together in real time to create image, similar to the way stereoscopic sight works. The test chamber is to be observed remotely via audio and video recording devices, via infrared cameras, electromagnetic radiation sensors, and motion detectors. Subject is to be instructed to hold SCP-178 up to the camera and report what he sees on the monitor. The camera is set to record. Pending success, the research staff will submit a request to view the recording. Results: Subject D-87-32-5, male, 32, no discernible mental abnormalities, is placed in the test chamber and instructed to pick up SCP-178 and hold it up to the 2 cameras. Subject complies and holds SCP-178 approximately 20 centimeters from the two cameras. Subject is instructed to view the monitor and describe what it sees. Subject complies and vocalizes distress, dropping SCP-178 and backing to the chamber wall. Research staff inquires to the source of the subject's distress. Subject states, "There, expletive redacted, watching me." Subject is instructed to hold SCP-178 to the two cameras. Subject is uncooperative. Research staff threaten subject with termination unless it complies. Subject complies and holds SCP-178 to the two cameras. Subject is instructed to attempt to communicate with the entities. Subject says, "Hello," in the opposite direction of the monitor, presumably in the direction of the entities. After 0.5 seconds, lacerations appear on subject on the torso, face, and right arm. Experiment is concluded, and SCP-178 is recovered. Autopsy on expired subject showed consistent lacerations approximately 27 centimeters in length and 8 centimeters in maximum width. Analysis of the recorded footage shows 3 separate entities with varying sizes observing subject. When subject attempts communication with entities, 2 grow 3 sharp claws and lunge at subject. Notes: they look more hideous than we imagined. We are going to need to analyze the footage more and calculate the speeds of the entities before we do any more experiments.